Hello, my name is Doug Mitchell and I'm a research associate here at Pueblo Grande Museum. My talk is about a project that museum staff recently completed on the artifacts excavated from Pueblo Grande over the last several decades. As you probably know, the site of Pueblo Grande is one of the most important prehistoric Hohokam village sites in southern Arizona, with a massive platform mound, 2 ball courts, and a Casa Grande-like tower. The first recorded investigations at the site occurred well over 100 years ago in 1883, when Adolphe Bandelier mapped major site features. Excavations continued at the mound through the late 19th and early 20th centuries. A city park and museum were created at the site in 1929. Decades of site erosion and early excavations by professionals, avocationals, and students had left the site damaged and exposed, and none of this work had ever been reported. In the late 1980s, thanks to a citywide bond program and the perseverance of then museum director David Doyle, money was made available for a comprehensive stabilization project as well as a systematic archival project. In 1989, the Pueblo Grande Archival Project began with the goal of assembling and publishing the results of archaeological investigations conducted from 1929 through the 1980s. Todd Bostwick and Chris Downham oversaw publication of 3 volumes of the archival series by the late 1990s, providing details of the platform mound and the history of the early excavations. One of the planned volumes was to focus on the artifacts that had been recovered from the previous decades of excavations. The Artifact Studies volume was begun in the mid-1990s by then city archaeologist Todd Bostwick, but the study languished. In 2015, city archaeologist Lorene Montero gathered a team of specialists to analyze selected artifacts and biological materials collected from the Pueblo Grande platform mound and immediate vicinity. The goal of this effort was to explore research themes pertaining to one of the largest remaining intact platform mound complexes in the Phoenix Basin. Despite challenges with using legacy collections, the analysts were able to use the various artifact classes, such as marine shell artifacts, groundstone, projectile points, pottery, wooden tools, faunal bone tools, ornaments, and food residue, to suggest wide-ranging cultural interaction and exchange throughout the 1,000-year occupation of the site, with an emphasis on specialized activities on the platform mound. In this talk, I will provide an overview of the Special Studies volume that we completed this past spring, highlighting some of the analyses. Excavations have been conducted by archaeologists at the Pueblo Grande platform mound and surrounding area as early as 1901. The excavations were conducted by professional archaeologists, Civilian Conservation Corps, and Works Progress Administration workers, students, and volunteers. As we all know, excavation methods, collection techniques, and research questions have significantly improved and changed over the decades. The analysts for this project faced many challenges using these older collections. The primary problem has been the lack of control on provenience data, that is, where specific artifacts were found and their context and associations. Consequently, many of the studies could only focus on broad spatial patterns, such as whether artifacts were found on the mound or away from it. This type of spatial analysis, however, led to some interesting findings. According to paleoethnobotanist Scott Kwiatkowski, analysis of the plant remains collected over the decades revealed some interesting spatial and temporal patterns. For example, as one might expect, maize or corn was present in each time period, both on and off the platform mound. Corn was an important subsistence staple at Pueblo Grande from the colonial through the classic periods. On the other hand, while domesticated beans were well represented in the early classic period context, both on and off the platform mound, their range was more restricted during the late classic period. This is an interesting difference for this important crop, although this conclusion has to take into account the precarious preservation of beans and the uneven excavation methods and locations. Kwiatkowski did note that the analysis of plant foods from the project suggests that subsistence at Pueblo Grande had likely become difficult by the late Classic period because the site catchment area was near its carrying capacity for several important wild plant food staples. This situation, combined with the unpredictable stream flow of the nearby Salt River, resulted in an increase in both droughts and destructive floods that would have diminished crop yields. Dr. Mark Chenault analyzed many of the special artifacts from the collections. He noted that while the Hohokam tradition featured fine artistry that can be seen in some of the artifacts from these excavations, these objects can also tell us about other aspects of the villagers' lives. They were farmers with close ties to the land and a dependence on canal irrigation. The challenge of watering thousands of acres of crops using hundreds of miles of canals had to have required close cooperation among the large villages through collaboration of village leaders, elders, shamans, and religious specialists. Some of the artifacts found on the platform mounds, such as clay and stone effigies, censers, and pallets, hint at ceremonies. Small legged vessels were found together with clay censers and other possible ritual artifacts on the mound. The platform mound itself was likely a place where villagers with key roles lived, at least part-time, and held ceremonies and festivals. Excavations in the portion of the village containing the platform mound and ball courts, the central precinct, recovered many of the ritual or ceremonial artifacts found at the site, such as a stone bowl with a carved snake and stone pallets. Of the 68 pallets found at Pueblo Grande, 61 were discovered in the central precinct, suggesting a concentration of ritual and ceremonial activities, and possibly the seat of authority in that central public space. Studies of the pottery from these excavations by Lorene Montero, Mary Ellen Walsh, Todd Boswick, Patrick Lyons, and Andy Lack also found evidence for interaction with other prehistoric cultures from a variety of distant regions. Ceramic vessels were made locally, but were also obtained through trade during marketplace activities at the ball court or plaza, or through travel throughout the state, as well as California, northern Mexico, New Mexico, and Utah. The diversity of culture areas represented in the Pueblo Grande non-local pottery collection exceeds that of other nearby large villages along Canal System 2, such as La Ciudad and Las Colinas. Represented in this collection are ancestral Pueblo, Mogollon, Cojonina, Prescott, Tucson Basin, and Zuni cultural traditions. Salado polychrome was also discovered on and around the mound. In a study of obsidian artifacts from Pueblo Grande, Dr. Chris Lohendorf found that obsidian artifacts were collected or traded from northern and southwest Arizona, northern Mexico, and western New Mexico. The obsidian data from Pueblo Grande is consistent with information from throughout the Phoenix Basin that shows a decline in the use of superior obsidian, which is located about 100 miles to the east, during the Classic period, and an increase in the use of Sauceda obsidian, and that source is located about 150 miles to the south. The closer superior source was inhabited by Apache and Yavapai peoples who were at conflict with the Akimel Atum in the Phoenix area. And the decline in the use of this material during the Classic period suggests these hunter and gatherers may have moved into the area at that time. Obsidian use patterns at historic period Akimel Atum sites along the middle Gila River show that the trends in obsidian acquisition patterns observed at Pueblo Grande continued unbroken into the historic period, which is one line of evidence for cultural continuity between the Classic period Hohokam and the Akimel Atum. Lohendorf also identified two historic period arrow points in the collection from the non-mound northwest field area. Historic cotton cloth was also recovered from one of the rooms on top of the platform mound. These examples suggest continued use of the village in the historic times, or at least visits to it. Important tools for the hohokam included grinding stones used to grind corn and other plants such as mesquite bean pods. Certain types of stone were best suited to making these tools. Dr. Craig Fertelmus and Mike Stubing found that the higher quality matates and monos were made from stone that originated along the Agua Fria and New rivers in what is now northern Peoria and along the Gila River near the Santan Mountains. They noted that vesicular basalt monos from the platform mound were on average larger than those from non-mound monos. Also, while the overall type and proportion of raw material used for ground stone was similar between the mound and non-mound areas, significant differences were observed in the source of the vesicular basalt. Roughly 40% of the basalt artifacts from the platform mound came from the Middle Gila River Valley, while about half of the artifacts from the non-mound sample came from the Phoenix New River area. These artifacts may have been collected from the different sources through family ties or marketplaces. The hohokam are known for their use of marine shell to fashion ornaments and jewelry. Studies have shown that almost all the shell used for hohokam jewelry and ornamentation was obtained from the northern Gulf of California, near the modern town of Puerto Peñasco in Sonora, Mexico. This is yet another example of the extent of hohokam trade networks. Andrea Gregory analyzed the shell artifacts for the study and noted that shell jewelry manufacture may have been an activity that was more restricted to those associated with the platform mound. It is possible that those artisans most skilled in shell jewelry manufacture were tasked with the initial reduction stages of shell, which required greater skill so that the shell artifacts wouldn't break. After which, partially worked items could be distributed to other craftspeople to do the finer design and carry the shell jewelry through the final production stages. Artifacts that probably were used in ritual activities were recovered from the platform mound and its northwest compound. These artifacts include numerous minerals, red and green pigments possibly used for costumes and body paint, pieces of asbestos, animal bone whistles, quadruped and bird figurines, unusual redware vessels with shallow bodies and 3 or 4 legs, marine shells with extensive hematite stains, wooden artifacts, and several quartz crystals. Evidence of feasting associated with the platform mound is suggested by the presence of at least 6 large redware vessels with diameters ranging from 25 to 40 centimeters, as well as deer and bighorn sheep bones. Specialized cooking features were also found inside rooms adjacent to the platform mound that may have been used for preparing meals used in ritual feasts. The nature of the early collections from Pueblo Grande limited the research questions that could be addressed. Nonetheless, the analysts focused on 5 research themes for this project. These themes included first, a spatial analysis of the mound complex versus non-mound. Secondly, ritual artifacts and activities on the mound. Third, temporal differences. Fourth, comparisons with other studies at Pueblo Grande and other villages in the Phoenix Basin. And finally, contemporary research questions in hohokam research. The most productive avenues of research from this study were those that focused on the mound-non-mound dichotomy and those that focused on ritual. Some of the more interesting findings included the following. There was greater evidence for marine shell ornament manufacturing on the platform mound. Larger monos made of higher quality material occurred more frequently on the platform mound. A small number of unusual artifacts were found on the platform mound and in the rooms immediately adjacent to it, and that included wooden tools, legged vessels, and shaft straighteners, which only occurred on the mound. Tubes and needles made from animal bones were more common on the platform, as well as shell tinklers, which we think are artifacts that were attached to costumes. And certain non-local pottery types found on and near the mound, such as San Juan redware and Sigi orangeware, were important in Pueblo ritual context and may indicate ceremonies and feasts at the Pueblo Grande platform mound. And ritual pallets were found concentrated with burial features near the mound, suggesting this cemetery served as the burial ground of a corporate group with ties to the platform mound, or at least to the core of the village. Now, although I've only discussed a few of the analyses done for this study, we would like to acknowledge all those who worked on this project. The 15 archaeologists who participated in this study are all professionals who volunteered their time to the project. They include specialists from private archaeology companies, museums, a university, tribes, and a state office. These archaeologists appreciated the value of the data and the importance of their analyses on this previously unreported data. With the help of museum collections curator Lindsay Vogel-Teeter, the cabinets were literally unlocked so the analysts could make significant contributions by the study of a legacy project. And in coming months, you'll be hearing from several of these analysts as they discuss their particular studies in greater detail. Thanks.